Hello, my name is Mordarim, and today we are going to go through different arrows, bows, and we are going to discuss the skill bows. So how did we approach this one? We did the same as with the armor. We activated our cheat mode, god mode, debug mode, activated our fly mode, and we also activated our repair mode with B, right? So when we activate it with B, we can repair in this window. We don't need a workbench. We also spawned all arrows that are available in the game, and we also spawned every bow. So we looked at every bow and every arrow at 100 skill, 75 skill, 50 skill, and 25 skill. I skipped the 0 skill because it's impossibly hard to get enough values at 0 because you're always leveling to at least 1, 2, 3. I needed to reset every time. And this one was way too much work for the gain I produce here. So the commands I will always put in the description, as with the last video. You'll find every command line and every item name I spawned. Also every enemy I tested it on. I always tested on trolls because they have a high health pool and are not immune to anything. So those are the way to go enemies. Okay, so let's go over the findings. What did we find? First thing, skill affects the damage, and skill affects the charge rate of every shot. It doesn't affect the range. It doesn't affect the projectile velocity, right? I got a few notes here, so we'll always look a little bit on this side. It also affects the poison fire damage, the frost damage, and the spirit damage of your arrows. But we found out that the BowDraugrFang bow, you see there is a value, a poison value at 4 to 5. This one increases from around 3 to 4 to 4 to 5. So there is an increase. But the damage of the poison tick doesn't increase. So at least I didn't notice it. So it's either bugged or so insignificant that it's not visible to the naked eye, right? So we found out that there is a difference in tick rates between the bows and arrows and so on and so forth. So when we look at the drog bow, we see a poison value here, and this one ticks 3 to 5 times, depending on if you ambush the enemy or just apply it like this. So there is like a variance, just like with the poison arrow. It applies 7 to 8 ticks with normal shot and 11 with a ambush shot. Might get higher, but I only observed 11 ticks for this one. The fire debuff only applies 5 ticks, no matter if you ambush the enemy, if it's raining, and so on and so forth. Poison and fire damage overrides. So if we have a higher value at, for example, 4.5, and we fire a shot, and the next one applies after 2 ticks at 3.5 damage tick, it will change the 4.5 tick to the 3.5 tick, and it will continue with 3.5. So what about the bows? What about the arrows? Well, there is a problem. I think every arrow and every bow scales differently. We tested a lot. So let's start with the arrows. Let's start with the normal bows. So there's the wood bow as the wood arrow, there's the flint arrow, the bronze arrow, the iron head arrow, the obsidian arrow, and the needle arrow. They just provide piercing damage. So which ones are the best? What should I upgrade? I would just say upgrade from wood to iron to needle. Everything in between provides just very insignificant small increases in damage, provided you have even the resources to get enough arrows for this one. When we have a look at the wood arrow as the baseline, there is only a 7% increase from the wood to the flint arrow. And when we looked at the bronze head arrow, there's a 15% increase of damage. Only after the iron head arrow you get around 30 to 35% increase in damage. For the obsidian arrow it's 45, and for the needle arrow it's 60% increase compared to the wood arrow. So how about the fire arrow? The fire arrow is completely useless, and I mean it. It provides so little damage, and it doesn't really scale with anything. So it's just 5 ticks of damage, no matter what. So if when it rains, it's 5 ticks. When it's foggy, it's 5 ticks. When it's sunny, it's 5 ticks. It's always 5 ticks. Does it scale? Yeah. So the damage you see here, it's even lower. It matches at 100 skill to the wood arrow if you add every tick of damage to this one. So probably not a good choice. The poison arrow, on the other hand, is I think the strongest arrow in the game. Provides an okay piercing experience, right? And if you ambush someone, or if you don't, it doesn't matter. It nearly matches the damage the needle arrow provides if you let every tick through, right? So it's more of a hit and kite type of playstyle here. So this one will match the damage of the needle arrow, at least at lower skill levels. Why it wouldn't match the needle arrow at high skill levels? Well, you don't have to charge up the needle arrow anymore, so you just fire one shot, and the next one, it's just like a Gatling gun. Yes, it scales, right? And the ticks are additive to the Draugbow, and there's a hidden interaction here. So the Draugbow has 3 ticks, the poison arrow has 7 to 8 ticks. If you add both, you get the damage of the Draugbow plus the damage of the poison bow for 7 to 8 ticks. So the 3 ticks get overwritten. And for the fire arrow, the fire damage per tick scales with the poison damage per tick. But I didn't look at this one because the values overlap. So it's just a wall of numbers and you cannot read anything here. What about the frost and the spirit arrow? Good question. I think the spirit arrow is only usable versus enemies that are really well, weak to this. The pierce damage is okay, it's an obsidian one, but the spirit damage is so low versus trolls, for example. It's just 5 at 100 skill and it gets to around 2 at 50 skill level, so it's just an obsidian arrow if the enemy is not weak to this one. And for the frost arrow, it provides a very significant chunk of damage. When we look at this one, it nearly matches our needle arrow. It probably is in between the obsidian and the needle arrow. The damage is at 40 at around 100 and gets to around 30 at 15 skill level. So it also scales. Same with the spirit. So we got those covered. Okay, so what about the bows? There is a lot to cover here. Let's have a look at what bows we tested. We tested the crude bow, we tested the BowFineWood bow, we've tested the Huntsman bow, and we tested the BowDraugrFang bow. We also tested the wood arrow, and we also tested the bronzed arrow for this specific experiment. We wanted to see what behavior they show with different skills. As you can see, first thing, the slope for the bronze arrow is steeper. So the bronze arrow indeed scales better than the wood arrow. We cross-checked this one by taking this one as the base and this one as the maximum. So those are the median determined values from our damage tests, right over here. And we see that the bronze arrow has always a higher value than the wood arrows, around 5%, 7%, somewhere around this part. So it scales a little bit better. So you can see the difference changes to higher values, so it gets further apart, right? What we also discovered is the crude bow scales the best, the BowFineWood bow scales the worst, the Huntsman bow and the BowDraugrFang bow scale approximately the same and are between the crude bow and the BowFineWood bow. We also discovered that there is a set pattern. Around 75, the crude bow scaling declines. So if we extrapolate this one to higher numbers, we would nearly reach the BowFineWood bow numbers with the crude bow, but we aren't. It tapers off at the end. We see that the BowFineWood bow has this S-curve for both, here it's just steeper. We also found out that the Huntsman bow and the BowDraugrFang bow are nearly the same, but the values of those two also taper apart. So the BowDraugrFang bow scales better at higher values than the Huntsman bow, but they are very, very close, right? And there's also the poison damage bow, the poison damage tick rate for the BowDraugrFang bow that is not calculated into this one. Like mentioned before, it probably is bugged, it doesn't scale, at least not in my tests. Okay, so after everything we looked through, do the tooltip damage numbers match up with our experimental values? Sadly not. Not even one. It's pretty funny. So we calculated our difference for this one just the same we did with our experimental value and got 60% for the crude bow. So the expected rise in damage from 25 to 100 skill points should be around 60. We got 80. For the BowFineWood bow it's 65. We got 43. For the Huntsman bow it's 66.2. We got 59. So see a pattern. And for the BowDraugrFang bow we expected 69. And we got 63. Is this good enough? Maybe. I don't know. I think not. So this one should get fixed. I think, just for clarity one. So, for our last calculation, we calculated our tooltip average for each bow. We wrote down our average damage at 100 skill points for each bow and calculated the difference to the crude bow. And we always saw a higher tooltip average increase than the damage increase we got. So those values you can see here, I won't read them, but you can see them, right, for yourself. So just one. For example, difference to crude bow from the tooltip to the damage one, it's 170% tooltip average increase, but only a 62.86% increase in damage. So, if you liked this video, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, ring that bell and follow me on Twitch. I stream every Tuesday and every Sunday and sometimes in between. I stream different games and I also test live. So, if you have any questions, come by and say hello. I will always accept you. So, see you next time.